Pros and cons to the Baylor versus Air Force game. I'm going to say this right now. Khalil Keith was sent home because of violation of team rules, just like Aranda Snacks Johnson. Both of those were starters. One, of course, Khalil Keith. This was his final game anyway. He's at the offensive line, while Aranda Johnson was a defensive back. I will also say it was a tough game to watch. No doubt about that. Now, I want to get rid of the cons first of all. 15 points on offense. 11 first downs, period. 0 for 11 on third down. 230 yards overall. Blake Shapen had 11 completions out of 23 attempts for 188 yards with 2 touchdowns. 26 rushing attempts for 42 yards. The offensive line couldn't block or anything, and Air Force is just that stingy. Of course, the defense allowed 30 points. That ain't gonna cut it. The defense allowed 20 first downs. The defense was 8 for 16 on third down. You can't get off the field, you don't have a lot of chances to win. The defense allowed 379 yards, which is now like 500 for 400, but still not good. Especially when the majority was on the ground. 276 rushing yards on 67 attempts with 3 touchdowns. The defense only had 4 tackles for loss. No sacks for the defense. Of course, no pass breakups either by the defense either. And no quarterback. And no quarterback hurries. Of course, no turnovers forced by the defense either. John Mayers missed a 38-yard field goal. He shanked that one. It was with the wind behind him at that. Just a rough way to end his career. Isaac Power had 4 punts for 145 yards, along with 50 yards and 1 landed inside the 20-yard line. The first 2 punts were bad, but I'm going to credit that to the wind some. Because here's the deal. It was really windy and really cold. 5 penalties for 27 yards. 5 penalties is too much, but the yardage is not terrible. It's just the penalties. You got dominating time possession against Air Force. 40 minutes, 3 seconds to 19 minutes, 57 seconds. Now, here's the pros. Blake Shapen had 2 passing touchdowns, but that's not saying a lot, I know. I don't know where he was all game prior to that last drive on offense. To be fair, I was not sure. I don't know where he was. Jalen Isles had 1 reception for 57 yards. Josh Cameron, a former walk-on, has now in Scarcer 3 receptions for 56 yards. Gavin Holmes in his last game had 4 receptions for 47 yards with 1 touchdown. Kelsey Johnson had 2 receptions for 20 yards. Hal Presley had an 8-yard touchdown catch receiving wise. He did draw a pass interference call on Air Force, which led to that touchdown right before halftime. You were down 9-7. I thought we had a chance then. But third quarter, we didn't show up. Air Force did. That's the difference. Besides getting out time possessed, killed. I mean, the offensive line allowed 4 tackles for loss, 2 quarterback hurries and 2 sacks, and only 2 pass breakups occurred. But I will say Blake Shapen, besides those pass breakups, he was not on target. But part of it's got to be the wind. In a way, it has to be. When you're facing the wind, it's hard to throw. I mean, the defense allowed 103 yards passing. But you got to keep in mind, one of those completions was for 68 yards. Take that for what's worth. out of the equation. I mean, that would be okay. 103 minus 68. Okay, that's 35 yards. I mean, now not a lot of on only like 3 receptions. Oh, the offense was also 3 for 6 on 4th down, but of course it needed to be better in this game, obviously. And I didn't get why we didn't go for it earlier in the game when it was like 4th and 2. When the wind was facing you. I don't get it. It's just, especially when you're down. But that's just a different. John Mayers made an extra point. Oh, yeah. And the good news is defensively, out of the 5 attempts for Air Force on 4th down, Air Force only made 2 of those. Take that for what it's worth. Baylor made a 2-point conversion. I mean, to get it down to 2 possessions late. Tried a non-side kick. We couldn't recover it, of course. Noah Rauschenberg had 1 touchback out of 2 kickoffs. The special teams only allowed 1 yard, while Baylor had 99 yards on special teams. They did block an extra point in the game by Air Force, which is good at the time. And no injuries. Granted, no Siaki Ika. He didn't play. Mark Milton didn't play. I would also say another negative was the tackling was bad. I mean, now, this is where I'm going to start with the state of the program here. I know this was a disappointing season. I know it is. And it was frustrating. We were just young in skill positions, and the defense took a step backwards, despite the defensive line. The cornerbacks didn't play good enough. You could pick, if you want, you can't just blame Blake Shapen for all the issues this year. It's so easy to pinpoint and say the quarterback's the problem, when actually, in some games, we couldn't run the ball. It's the offensive line. They have to be better. They had to. In some instances, the wide receivers. The defense didn't show up. We had special teams issues. I mean, it's not just one guy's fault for the season and all those losses. There are a combination of things. The only game there was no special teams issues and we lost was Kansas State. Just to be fair, because that game was more like we got dominated offensively and defensively. Special teams, we did good. Now, going forward, they're going to have to bring in quarterbacks through the transfer portal. 2 of those. Because it's not likely you're going to get a high school quarterback. They could try, but the likelihood is not that great. You have to go transfer portal. And I will not just try to get just a depth piece. Get somebody who could not just compete for Blake Shapen, but might even flat out beat Blake Shapen. I see the potential in Blake Shapen a little bit, but he's got to develop. I mean, I also think part of the problem with Blake Shapen is after the concussion, he didn't have many great games the rest of the way. At least he didn't turn the ball over in this game. But the problem is, you couldn't sustain drives. Of course, they're going to have to get wide receivers. Get one more wide receiver or 2. Offensive line, yes. You're losing everybody on that starting unit this year. I mean, it's the truth. They already got 2 guys on the offensive line. Maybe 1 or 2 more. Now, defensive line, yes. Depending on TJ Franklin and Gabe Hall. Or some other player. I don't know. Cornerbacks, safeties, yes. Maybe linebackers, maybe. I know they already offered a tight end that's from North Texas. I already mentioned him a few times now. I don't need to go rehash that. I will address the transfer portal, both coming in and going out of the program, as well as the coaching staff changes. First of all, we need to hire a DC. We need to. It's just a matter of when are we going to do it. I expect it to be in January, just like the other hires. First of all, there has to be that. Second, you need a special teams coordinator. The special teams needs to improve from this year to next. Because some games, if we didn't have special teams issues, we would have won. Like that TCU game, that BYU game, even the West Virginia game. So, yeah. That's another reason. Another thing. Of course, position coaches like safeties and inside linebackers. Whatever Ron Roberts was covering defensively before he got fired. So, that's the state of the program right now. We just need to hit the reset button and address the issues in the offseason and revamp this roster so we'll be better next year. And granted, we don't know the schedule. That's another issue. It's not our fault either. It's because Texas and Oklahoma are trying to get out of the Big 12 right after the 2023 season. They want to do that now. It's been on the up and up. Of course, it has to be agreed mutually on the money situation. So, we have to benefit financially. The Big 12 does. And I'll update on the schedule as is. I already know 2 of the non-conference games. I just don't know what the third one is. Utah is one of them. But I don't know how many guys they're going to bring back. And the other one is Texas State, who just got a new head coach. So we should win that game in theory. And I would think they would have some type of FCS or Group of 5 opponent again. And I would think it's going to be a lesser opponent. So probably an FCS. So we should win that game. So we'll have to wait and see what the schedule is. Conference-wise. Because this is going to be 1 year with 14 teams. Which is a lot to deal with. Especially when we know this is probably the last year we're going to play Oklahoma and Texas. I mean, and I know Baylor didn't do any favors for the Big 12 last night. But I will say this. For all that we know, the Big 12 could lose to every team in the bowl games this year. Or nearly all of them. TCU's probably going to lose to Michigan. Wisconsin's going to beat Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State's just too depleted right now. Texas Tech could lose to Ole Miss. Kansas could lose to Arkansas. And I'm trying to think, what other games are there? I know I nailed on most of those. Oklahoma's going to lose to Florida State, probably. Oklahoma didn't deserve to be in that bowl game against Florida State, to be fair. The only reason why they did it is for the TV money and the money from fans going there. Despite their record, especially in conference, when they finished behind Baylor. I mean, I'm just stating the obvious. Trying to think what other games. Yeah, Texas Tech and Ole Miss. Texas could lose to Washington. I mean, Texas doesn't have Bijan Robinson or Roshan Johnson as well as Damarian Overshown. They're opting out of the game. And Quinn Ewers is not the better quarterback in that game. He really, really isn't. It's Michael Penix. I mean, Kansas State could lose to Alabama. I already said that. I already said TCU could lose to Michigan. They're probably going to lose to Michigan anyway. So, look, it's just tough bowl game matchups for the rest of the conference here. So, if you want to bash Baylor for last night, you better watch out for your own team. Because, for any Big 12 fan out there. Because, look, we could go winless or nearly winless in the Big 12 in bowl games this year. So, I'm not going to rub it into your all's faces about those games. But if you do to me, I might do it right back. Though, it's just like one of those things. It's like, really? Of all things, let's just concentrate on your team only. I mean, seriously, I'm not going to rub it in. I'm not going to rub it in. I'm definitely not going to go for every team in the conference, though, especially those two teams who are leaving the Big 12. I want them to lose more than anybody. Of course, I want TCU to lose because that would help recruiting. I mean, it would hurt recruiting-wise for Baylor to compete with TCU then. And I expect TCU to take a step back anyway next year. I'm just saying. They're going to lose Max Duggan. He's gone, like I said in the post, to the NFL draft. Kendre Miller could be gone. Quentin Johnston hasn't made a decision announced yet, but he's going to probably be gone too. He's like a first-round pick. If nothing else, he's like a second or third rounder. He's going to be gone. So, seriously, before y'all think of it, and of course we know Houston is probably going to take a step back. They're going to lose a lot. BYU's losing a lot. Of course, we don't know the Big 12 schedule for any of these teams in the Big 12, which I'm going to go over once the schedules are released. Not just Baylor's schedule, but everybody conference schedule, as well as the non-cons. So, for every team in the Big 12 here. Because, look, it's important to know who your conference opponents are. And I expect Baylor next year, regardless who they play in the Big 12, to be better next year. First of all, we're going to be a year older in some areas. 2, we're going to address our issues in the transfer portal. And we need a quarterback competition. So, Blake Shapen might not start next year. For all we know, he might not start. I'm not going to say he's going to start, but I'm not going to say he's not going to start. So, I'm just putting that out. They're going to probably hit the transfer portal and get 2 guys to not only compete, but beat Blake Shapen. I am thinking they should just do that. Because if Blake Shapen wants to leave, and if he doesn't get the starting job, it's on him for leaving. Because look, we're going to have to get transfer quarterbacks anyway and just be better at the quarterback position going forward. We have to. And of course, we know Baylor needs to get a 24 quarterback for next year. You can't go 3 years in a row without a quarterback in the class. I'm sorry. And if you want to say Jeff Grimes needs to be fired, you're foolish. BYU wants him back. I know. They do. And the thing is, Jeff Grimes is not the one that's executing the plays or throwing the ball or anything in terms of like the players doing it. It's up to the players to do it. They just couldn't do it. There needs to be some juice to the program. There needs to be some fire in terms of like energy wise. We got to find a way to address our issues and be better. I already know West Virginia and Iowa State, regardless of their schedule, are going to be the worst teams in the conference. I could promise you that much. Just look. Iowa State's offense, abysmal. I mean, West Virginia is losing a lot of guys to the transfer portal, including the best players. They're going to be bad next year. Houston might be one of the worst too, depending on what they have. I mean, it's the truth. TCU is going to take a step back. It's just a matter of how much of a step back. And of course, Kansas State, the trick with them is, do they return Deuce Vaughn? I already know they're losing some of the pass catchers on that roster, but I know their tight end Ben Sinnot's going to be back. So it's a matter of, and Deuce Vaughn at this point, it's a matter of him. I mean, Kansas is going to be better, but the problem is their defense is bad. It is. Texas Tech's defense is not that great either. I mean, let's face it, and they're losing some guys to the NFL, at least one guy to the NFL, Tyree Wilson. I know, and they're kind of old in some areas too. So, and they don't lose a lot of guys in the transfer portal. Oklahoma State's going to take a step back. They're going to. No Spencer Sanders, no Dominic Richardson. Some even their best players on defense are in the transfer portal too. They're not going to be as good next year either. Of course, I already said BYU is going to lose a lot. They're probably going to lose a lot of guys. So, chill out. Let's just focus on the here and now. I just know that because of looking at the rosters for all these teams. Or looking statistically speaking. I would also say Kansas State should be I would think the favorite for the Big 12 next year. I think, but I don't know. I'm trying to think who else. Texas, they're losing Bijan and Roschon, but I know they're going to get Isaiah Nayor back. That's going to be a tough offense to handle, and I think they're on the up and up too. So that's another team in the Big 12. And the thing is, they're going to have a quarterback competition themselves because Quinn Ewers is not that great. They got Arch Manning, though, so they're going to have to debate on that. And I expect another guy to go to the transfer portal from Texas, Malik Murphy. I would think so. I mean, that's just me speaking on all those teams. And we'll have to wait and see how many stars each team returns as well. So, anyways, if you like this content, hit the like and subscribe button. I see you guys later. It's going to be 500 subscribers now. Let's go.